The next challenge at that place was just immediately with the prison officers.
Okay.
They take it upon themselves, and they grind you down psychologically.
Yeah.
They taunt you. They have bets on trying to get prisoners to kill themselves,
Kill themselves.
which has been proven in Feltham. That came out a few years
And
ago.
what methods do they use to encourage prisoners to kill themselves?
What they were doing to me in Aylesbury, in the morning, they would come in at 8 o'clock and they would put a milk in on the side. And
On the side of what?
on the side of the table. They'd come in, open the door, and they'd put the milk on the side. And then
So you're in a let's just start a minute. You're in a one-man cell, you said earlier. So I imagine it's like the size of a bus stop shelter or less.
yeah,
And you've got your bunk on one side, and is it the standard combination sink toilet with a little stool table?
yeah, like a little stool, a chair, a
Is it all bolted down, silver?
all bolted
Yeah,
down.
so it's like the American style.
You've got a steel toilet. And in that cell I was in, I still remember it was B213 right at the end, and all the windows there was no windows.
There's no windows,
Nah,
no sunlight.
No windows. Just like all the windows were broken and it hasn't been fixed. And when I say freezing, it is freezing.
So the glass is gone.
Gone.
And what is the bars?
Just bars, yeah.
Okay.
And you just put a towel over it, but it's still
Wow,
freezing. I used to
man.
wake up with leaves all over my cell, where leaves used to come in.
Wow, I had no idea.
Freezing, yeah. You're in your
There's no
bed.
temperature control.
No, you're in your bed with socks on your hands, with like wearing a tracksuit under the cover, just freezing,
Yeah,
absolutely
it's like
freezing.
opposite Arizona then.
So
the guy comes in, puts the milk on the table.
puts the milk on the side, and then you'll drink it, throw it out the window.
Throw it out the window.
Yeah, you just
That's
throw
the
it,
trash.
That's the trash. Yeah, you throw it out the window, and then they'll just open the door, like 8 of them, and they'll say, "Come downstairs," and you'll go downstairs with them.
And downstairs is the day room.
Downstairs was the day room association. Couple
What
of
does
pool
that look like,
tables,
the day room?
Old, dilapidated.
Did you say pool tables?
Couple of pool tables.
Aren't
yeah.
they weaponized, the sticks?
There's always fights at the pool table.
But a pool ball in a sock.
All the time, yeah, it gets used. What happens on the pool table is you'll say, "I'm next," and then you'll be waiting. And then when it's your turn, someone will just grab the triangle and start setting up the balls. And then you'll say, "What you doing? I'm next." And then you have to fight. You have to fight. And that's the if you're going to play pool, that's what will happen. And people will just stay on. They'll try and, victimize you, and you have to fight, and you have to draw blood, and you have to get a weapon, and you have to hurt them. That's what you have to do. And there's no fair rules. You hurt them. You do it from behind. You do it in the dinner queue when they're not looking, because they'll do it to you.
Survival of the fittest.
Yeah, they'll do it to you. But with the milk, what they've done, they've tricked me, because on the bottom of the milk they write B213, and then they find it on the floor. And
what does that mean?
Because they've wrote my cell number on the bottom of the milk.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then they'll drag me down into the office.
Oh, for trashing it?
Yeah, for throwing it. And they'll put you in this kangaroo court type situation. It's not a normal adjudication with a governor. It's just a principal officer, so like a senior officer, sitting there. He won't even look at you. He'll just say, guilty, throwing milk out the window. And they'll say 2 weeks loss of TV. So they'll come and take your TV.
Yeah.
And then a few days later, or within that 2 week period of having no TV, so you've just got your music now, they'll knock on your door and they'll say, "Do you want the gym?" And because you're banged up all the time, you'll say, "Yeah, I want the gym." And then they'll all come for gym, and they'll walk straight past your door and not open your door. So you'll put your bell on, and then they'll wait till the wing's quiet, and then they'll all come up and say, "What's the emergency?"
All right, so for Americans watching this, what does that mean? Put your bell on.
So you've got an emergency cell bell, so you push it.
Okay.
It's supposed to only be for emergencies.
Yeah.
And the officer will come to the door. But in Aylesbury, they just slam the flap and they go, "What's the emergency?" So people use the bell. People misuse it. They say, "Gov, can you go and get me a roll up off number 2?" Or I need to see like a listener, a Samaritan, I'm suicidal, or so it's used for various different things. But yeah, so you put your bell on, and I said to the officer, like, you didn't let me out for gym, so he just slammed the flap. He said, that's not an emergency. 2 weeks more, no TV. And so they're kind of like stitching you up and setting you up. And then what happens is, on the day you're supposed to get your TV back, you'll come out for lunch, because they haven't given it back to you, even though you're supposed to have it back, and they won't give it back to you. And then you ask them again at tea, and they won't give it back to you. And then it gets to 8 o'clock where the night staff are coming on. So you put your bell on because they haven't given it back. And then they'll come to your flat. What's the emergency? And you'll say, I was supposed to get my TV back. They'll say, that's not an emergency. 4 weeks more, no TV. Then they take your radio. Then they take your association off you. And you end up being banged up for 24 hours a day. And you'll come out 3 or 4 nights a week for 10 minutes for a shower. And that's it. Because no one really used to go on the yard there, because it was at 7 in the morning. You get about 10 people out there. No one really used to go out there.
That's why they do it early, isn't it? So the guards have to supervise people.
Yeah, probably. And then they grind you down, and then they start escalating it, because it's like a game to them. The officers when I was in Aylesbury were a bunch of guys who seemed to be quite sadistic and brutal, who seemed to get a kick out of coming into that work environment and just kicking the shit out of teenagers. You'd smell alcohol on their breath sometimes. And what they would do, they would open your door, and again, giving you the milk, and they wouldn't put it on the table. So you'd get up half asleep and go to grab it, and they'd pull it back. And then eventually your arm would be like near the door, and then they would just grab your arm and just jump on you and start shouting, violent prisoner in B213, violent prisoner in 213. In Aylesbury, there's probably 15 alarm bells a day, every single day, 7 days a week, 15 alarm bells. And they just come from everywhere, power in numbers, and they all, 40, 50 officers, they all come, and they throw you on the floor. They drag you into the segregation unit, and it's all through corners, no cameras. There was no cameras then, all dark corners, thin staircases. They're smashing your head on the side, giving you little digs. And then they drag you into like a concrete room, like a segregation unit with a concrete slab on the floor. And they throw you on the floor. They pull a knife out, cut your clothes off, strip you naked, and really hurt you. They bring your thumbs back. And it feels so, you feel helpless. You feel terrified, scared. You hear these stories that they've killed people, covered it up. And yeah, you just feel. I'd been restrained in other prisons, but this place was just different. It was just a really horrendous place. And what they do in Aylesbury, they then put you in that cell and they leave you naked on this concrete slab, and you're 18 years old. But what they do in Aylesbury, it's not done then. They come back and taunt you. So they come back to the cell, shaking their keys, opening the flap, and they come back at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, saying, have you had enough? Yeah, is that what you wanted, son? Do you know what I mean? And they grind you down. And now you're in this concrete tomb. It's a concrete tomb. You've got, it's summer, 90 degrees. There's no air. There's no air in the cell. The taps don't run. They just drip, because they've been smashed up so many times and not fixed properly. And the building's so old and the plumbing's so old. And you're living in this room, just going out of your mind, and you start to lose your mind. When I watch your videos and I hear the Americans talking about isolation and segregation units, and I know they're reducing it in as many as 20 or 30 states in America, and that's been quite successful. In this country, as a young offender, you're only supposed to be in isolation, but at the age between, I think, 15 to 17 it's a week, 18 to 21 it's 2 weeks, and over 21 it's 3 weeks. But in the American system, they put them in isolation for years. And when you hear them talk about it, I can identify it, because it's true what the Americans say when they say you begin to hallucinate. You start seeing things on the wall, because you're banged up in a room 23 and 3/4 hours a day. You might get a shower 2 or 3 or 4 times a week if you're lucky. Bit of yard time for 20 minutes, walking around in a goldfish bowl, and you're just alone with your mind. And you go crazy. You lose your mind. You become very paranoid. You have no human interaction with anybody because they just open the door with like 8 of them, and just throw your dinner in. So you die from a lack of love. You die from that lack of human interaction. And in Aylesbury, it just seemed, that they could, all those rules and regulations about 14 days or whatever, what they would do, they were clever. So you'd get the 14 days in the block, in the isolation. On the 14th day at tea time, they would just swing the door open, and the fear, you'd feel all the fear, because these guys have proven to you that they can attack you at any time with no provocation from you. And so just the fear, listening to them all coming up the stairs, all the keys, and they'd be laughing and joking. And you are paranoid, but there is reality in the sense that these guys can take my life. They could kill me and cover it up. So they'd all come up the stairs, and I remember being in there for 14 days. The 14 days had expired. They opened the door. They said, "Are you moving back to B Wing tomorrow?" I'll take that as a no then. Here's your nicking sheet, and just threw the nicking sheet on the floor and shut the door.
What's a nicking sheet?
A nicking sheet is a governor's report of an offence. So they have these range of prison offences. And he'd written on there, refuses a direct order to move back to B Wing, but he didn't even give me the opportunity. And then you go on the adjudication in the morning. It's a long table with the governor at the end. And then you have 2 prison officers right here, so facing you, and they just eyeball you, and they're big, and they intimidate you. That's what they do. You'll have another couple over here because people have, tried to attack them before. If you give any indication in your body language or in the tone of your voice being aggressive that suggests that there's going to be any aggression, they just fold you up. They just get you on the deck, and when you're banged up, you hear it happen, and you hear the screams, of people being twisted up, bent up, and yeah, he sat there and told the governor on that particular occasion that I refused the order, and you're just so angry, and then they laugh at you and smirk at you, and that's what they do. They grind you down. And around about this time was when it had been proven, the officers had been done for it, that they were putting bets on 16, 17-year-olds to see when they could get them to kill themselves. There was one particular case, the guy was a white supremacist. He had a swastika on his forehead. The Indian guy that they put in the double cell with him was 15 years old. And they put a bet on putting him in the cell. He was being released the next day, the Indian, who's 15 years old, and they put this white supremacist in there, and he beat him in Feltham Young Offenders Institution. They had bets on it, on the outcome, who was going to beat who, and he battered him to death with a table leg and killed him. And the reason the public in this country don't know about these cases is because the Home Office is protected by top level, absolutely outstanding QCs. And
what does Home Office mean, and what does QC mean, just for people watching this?
So the Home Office is the British government's office that deals with like the judiciary, immigration, and issues like that.
It's like the Ministry of Justice.
Yeah, like similar to the Ministry of Justice. And a QC is like a top level barrister, who is vastly experienced in Crown Court trials.
So barrister is like a lawyer or legislator.
Yeah. And the Home Office have have so many of these cases going on all the time, at any one time throughout 12 months of the year, in England and Wales. And what they do, they always settle out of court and just pay the people off. So prisoners who've come out with no job, who don't have a lot of money, and they're offered £20,000, £15,000, they just take it.
Yeah,
they just take it. And they very, very, very rarely take these cases to trial because they always settle the cases. So
That's what Arizona Department of Corrections was the same. Like someone sues for the hepatitis C damage because they didn't get the treatment, and they just settle out of court to get rid of them so that they don't have to set a precedent and give everybody the hepatitis C treatment.
Yeah.
But just going back to your story specifically again now, you've given us a brilliant, detailed description of this young offenders prison and how it sounds to me like the abuse that they've done to you might have pushed you to the point of contemplating suicide. Were you contemplating suicide at this point?
Yeah, I was very suicidal. I was kept in that segregation unit for so long.
How long?
I was in and out of there for a period of 13 months. But even when I went back to the wing, I was banged up for 24 hours a day on the wing anyway. Yeah. So it was just the same, really.
So they targeted you for this abuse.
And what one of the things that was affecting the deterioration of my mental health, because I identified with it from one of your videos, was this cell. I'll never forget it. B213, the corner cell. It was the second or third day I was in the cell. I remember turning the light off with the telly on. So I just had the light from the telly. I got these windows with all this air, this cold air coming through. This really old, decaying cell with just bricks, this steel toilet, poor plumbing, like I said. And I remember turning the light off, and I remember smoking a hash joint and just watching the telly. And I remember hearing, and I thought, what's that? So I jumped up, turned the light on, and I saw a cockroach. It must have been 2.5 inches long, like that, really thick and wide. And it was just horrible seeing it. And in my mind, I thought, that's come under my door. So, and then I clocked that I saw other people blocking their doors up. So I blocked the door up with newspaper. I got my brush and flicked it out, covered up my door, and then I turned the light off again, sitting there watching the telly on my bed. And then 2 minutes later, I heard, and I got up, and there was another 2 of them. And just seeing them, it's just horrible because they're so big. And this time I flicked them out the door, laid back down, but I couldn't relax because of the visual memory of seeing these horrible creatures. And then again, 2 minutes later, after I turned the light off, this time when I turned the light on, they were everywhere. It was like there was a nest in there. They were on the walls, all coming out the side of the toilet. They were coming in the window, and the whole cell was just crawling with them. So I had 2 options. And it reminds me of when you tell your stories and you say, right, this is a situation where you have 2 or 3 options and none of the options are good. So I've got 2 options. I can smash the cell up, and then I have to endure all the stress and the physical pain of them all coming in on me and getting attacked by the officers and dragged all the way down to the sec. The only way I can get out of this cell, they're not going to move me. You can't make them requests there. They run that place. You don't have a say in these things. They're not going to move me to another cell. So I've got 2 options. I can either just stay in there, or I can smash the cell up and go down to the isolation unit again. So I decided to stay in there. And I used to I moved the bed because it wasn't bolted down. I moved it into the middle of the cell, blocked up all the holes, blocked up the door, blocked up the thing. And I used to just lay like that with the light. The light used to be on 24 hours a day. I never used to turn the light off, and I would just be like that under the sheet and just hardly ever slept. I would sleep for an hour, half an hour, 2 hours, and just never slept. And that was really affecting. And I was in that cell for 2.5 years in that cell.
Grief.
2.5.
So you were thinking about killing yourself then, with lack of sleep?
When I was thinking about killing myself was when I was in the segregation unit. They kept doing all these stupid things to keep me in there. They were intimidating me. They made me believe that they were going to kill me and cover it up. And they used to taunt me, laugh at me, shake their keys. my wrists, my body was so weak. I was so skinny and deteriorating physically, psychologically. I was paranoid. I was losing my mind. These long periods of isolation, weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, month after month, of being banged up for 24 hours a day. And no music. All they'd let you have would be a prison Bible and prison toiletries. That's all they would let you have down there. And there was one time they put me on one of these stupid kangaroo court adjudications for some bullshit. I can't even remember what it was. And I I was so angry with this officer that I wanted to attack him. If you attack an officer in Aylesbury, it's game over for you. And I remember coming out of the adjudication, and I went like that to him. And as soon as I went like that, they all just jumped on me, and they dragged me into this cell on the bottom landing, this freezing cold concrete cell. And they broke both my wrists. They smashed my ribs in. They were kicking me in the face. There must have been, the whole room was full up with officers, about probably 15 of them. They were kicking me, kneeing me, punching me in the head. I had long hair. They ripped all my hair out. They stripped me naked. They were all laughing and taunting me as they were doing it. And then they put me up against the back wall with my hands up there. And when they bend your wrists and you scream and they do it more, it's like torture, because they're doing it because you're screaming, they're doing it more. And they just put me through this, control and restraint, if it's done properly, doesn't even hurt if it's done properly. But what they were doing was really brutal, and they beat me. And they kept me naked while they were all standing there laughing at me for what seemed like forever, really. But I think it was about 15, 20 minutes. This whole episode was about half an hour. And they left me in the cell, and my wrists were already sore. And what they used to do, they used to do this twice a day at lunch and tea time. They would say, "You're too violent." They say, "You're too violent to see anybody." So they wouldn't let you see anybody. And they wouldn't let you come out of that room. So they would put your dinner in the cell next door. Then they would put shields on and hats and riot gear. And they'd just open a flap and say, "Stand at the back wall, stand at the back wall." And you're pleading with them.
Yeah.
In the other younger thing, you'd give it a bit of mouth. But this place, you pleaded with them, "Please, please, like, I don't want any trouble." And then they'd just storm in the cell, throw you on the floor, squash you into the corner with the big plastic shields, squash you into the corner, get your hands, bend you up, take you into the next cell, throw you in the cell, all run out, and they'd do that to you twice a day to feed you. So I became really weak, psychologically weak. My mental health was deteriorating. They'd ripped off my hair. I kept it in my shoe because there was so much of it, and I kept it as evidence. And I started writing down what they were doing to me. I started writing it all down. And I remember being on that one's land, and I think it was summertime now. I was dehydrating. I had no running water. I would get 2 hot drinks a day that they'd bring in. Other than that, I had nothing to drink. So I ended up having to drink the toilet water. And these toilets are like disgusting, just absolutely all like scaling up the side, all green. And I ended up having to drink the toilet water just to hydrate myself. There's no air in the cell. There's no window. The windows don't open. There's just little holes, but they're all blocked up. And I'm dripping with sweat, just losing weight, deteriorating in the cell. And I remember just being so scared and terrified in there. And I remember ripping the sheet, and there was nowhere really to hang the sheet. The only place to hang the sheet was on the taps. And I remember putting the noose around my neck and tying it onto the taps and just sitting there with it like round my neck. I still remember it, but it is. I don't think I wanted. I think I wanted. I did want to die, but I just didn't. I didn't have the ability in the cell to actually go through with it. Do you see what I mean? And yeah, it's just a horrendous experience at Aylesbury. Awful place. I had nightmares for 10 years afterwards. Even now, so I was 18 then, I'm now 36. If anybody's behind me when I'm out on the street, just walking around or just going about my daily business, I can't tolerate at all anyone behind me,
Yeah.
because they would always jump me from behind and grab me, and that's still with me. I still have that today. And when I'm walking the street, I'll move over and let people pass me. I can't have people behind me.
Yeah.
And yeah, it has been it was a traumatizing experience. I'd wake up in the middle of the night covered in sweat, thinking there's 15 prison officers there. I'd see their faces. I still remember their names. I still remember their faces. I went to court against them in Oxford. And interestingly, on YouTube, there is a video of Aylesbury Young Offenders Institution, and it is actually one of the only UK prison documentaries which will quite accurately show what it's like in there. If you watch that video, you'll just see on the cameras the gang fights.
What's it called on YouTube? Do you know? I'll put it in the description box for the viewers.
HMP Aylesbury.
Okay.
But it's not actually an HMP. HMP means adult prison. It's HMYOI, Young Offenders Institution Aylesbury.
Yeah.
But you see the gang fights, you see officers punching inmates.
Yeah.
But I saw a couple of faces, a couple of officers on that I remembered saying to the documentary maker, yeah, we really care about, the prisoners. We just want to deliver care.
Yeah.
But it does give you quite an accurate reflection of what the prison is actually like. And like I said, I believe, Shaun, that documentary is so accurate because if you take a film crew into Aylesbury, you can't avoid it because there's 15 alarm bells a day. So you're going to get loads of juicy footage, even going in there for 24 hours.
Wow.
But yeah, awful place. People in there have committed serious crimes, long-termers, a lot of people in there for murder, rape, gang crime. But the prison service mission statement is to detain those sent by the courts and to treat them with dignity and respect and to help them lead law-abiding lives and useful lives in the future. What I'm describing, my experiences in Aylesbury, is not consistent with that mission statement in any way, shape or form. And with an 86% reconviction statistic for young offenders within the first 2 years of them being released, that shows which is the highest in Western Europe for young people in prison. That shows you that there is no rehabilitation in that young offenders institution estate in our country. No rehabilitation at all.
I agree.
It's proven on rats and it's proven on animals. If you lock somebody up for 24 hours a day in isolation, 23 hours a day, it makes you more aggressive, it makes you more violent, it makes you have difficulties in your interpersonal relationships. And you get all the horror stories in America of people spending so long in isolation and then they'll go and stab someone 150 times because they just lose their mind. And it's proven, and it's horrendous.
I really appreciate you detailing that story because young people in this country, they're glamorized into thinking that prison is a holiday camp and these things only happen in America. When I tell my story, some of them think these things only happen in America.